Yes, she did. All right, great, thank you. All right, welcome to the Racial Equity and Policing Commission Policy and Practice Subcommittee meeting. Today is Wednesday, March 3rd. This meeting will be an electronic meeting pursuant to the Core Commission determination that conducting the meeting at a physical location presents a substantial risk to the health and safety of those who may be present at the anchor location. The subcommittee meeting will not have a physical location and all attendees will connect remotely. To view the meeting, you can join via Zoom or visit the Salt Lake City website, slc.gov/boards/racial-equity-in-policing-commission/. So with the formalities, welcome to the, I always love to start out the meeting so formal like that and reading that. Welcome to the meeting. Let me share my screen. I can put the agenda up there. See who we have: Commissioner Johnson, Commissioner Shiflett, Chief Doubt, welcome. Thanks for joining us. Kira, Commissioner Powell, Officer Grove, and Givens, Mr. Cottrell. So did I miss anybody? Oh, Commissioner Bonuri raised her hand, but I'm not seeing her in the meeting. Oh, there she is. Okay. And welcome, David. And Chief Brown, welcome to the meeting. So let me just review the agenda real quick. We do have the hour, not much time to go over. Dante, welcome. Thanks for joining us today and being present and engaging with us as well. So let me go over the agenda and make sure we budget appropriate time for those that are on the meeting for a limited time or that might need to leave. I'll share my screen now. And tell me if you can see the agenda. All right, can you see the agenda? All right, great. And I can probably make it a little bigger here. There we go. All right, so welcome to the meeting. We'll just review the dates real quick. Want to do a quick debrief about on the call we had with Shafin and Suksimaran on last Thursday, and then review some of these the recommendations we didn't get to last time and some of the questions that we had. Let me just verify that we've got Chief Brown and Doubt on the line, and I'm assuming to speak to some of these items that we didn't have the opportunity to spend enough time on last time. And so as I look through these, there might be questions on the body-worn camera ordinance. I think Mr. Cottrell is on for that as well. And then this discussion we just broached last time on collaboration with other agencies. Appreciate Chief Doubt being able to spend 8 minutes with us last time and even more, and apologize to you, Dante, for keeping him additional time in our last subcommittee, but we appreciate that. And perhaps on data, was there anything else specific, Chief Brown or Doubt, that you wanted to discuss other than what's on the agenda today?
Josh, I'm sorry, I missed last meeting, so I'll defer to Tim if there was some more that we wanted to talk about.
Okay.
All I was going to talk about was that that grant that Commissioner Basuri was talking about, and I couldn't find anything on it, so we don't have that grant.
And that was a question from Commissioner Bonnery. You said, Chief?
Basuri? Is that her name?
Yeah, Luna?
It's Banuri, Luna Banuri.
Basuri, yeah.
Okay. Any questions or follow-up on that, Commissioner Bonnery?
No, not at the moment. Thank you.
Okay. All right, so so the upcoming schedule, next subcommittee meeting is the 17th and the 31st. Looking at this month, regular commission next week on the 10th and 24th. And then I want to debrief with you guys the call we had last Thursday, get your inputs and thoughts, and then share back with you what I pulled out as potential recommendations or just talking points, and talk about potential follow-up with them on the 23rd or 31st. So I'll open it up to you that were on the call. What was that helpful? Was that valuable? What did you gain, if anything, from that call with Shafin and Suksimaran?
Well, I'll say that I thought it was absolutely fantastic. It was nice to talk to people who appeared to understand the direction that we're going in, that we are just trying to address the social injustices and change the policy or address the policy. And the email that I just sent, when they said language is everything, language really is everything. And so we have to be careful on what we use when we're trying to look at these policies and procedures. So it just felt comforting for me.
All right, good. So yeah, it was validating. Good to hear and to get a different perspective. Good, thanks, Commissioner Shiflett. Others?
I like what Shafin was saying, and I do believe that it's a deeper conversation on deeper topics. I wish they just would have shared more of what they were exactly doing, you know, to cure some of the situations. He never broke it down to, you know, what their cure was or what they were using for remedies.
Yeah, that's a good observation, Commissioner Johnson, and they felt the same way you do. We talked yesterday and had a good discussion. They enjoyed it, felt it was valuable, but said the same thing you did. We just didn't have enough time and look forward to getting to that place and engaging further. So good to hear. Others?
I felt like I got a lot of insightful information out of it. I was able to take a lot of notes. A few things I took note of were some things they mentioned, such as like, one of my key takeaways were you should be partnering with the communities. Law enforcement is in the service industry. So we had to learn helplessness and unlearn that. And then it says, when you've been doing the same things and get the same responses, you'll eventually give up, as well as how, piggybacking off of what Commissioner Shiflett said earlier, but how words matter and how you write these recommendations matter. Also, I made an official request or recommendation to the City Council yesterday as part of the youth subcommittee to extend our time frame in which we can work as a commission. And the reason for doing so is because one of the other key takeaways I took away was that a lot of the things we're discussing are larger issues and conversations, and there's no way to meet a tangible, sustainable, equitable standard by June. And Dante spoke about that So one of our hopes is, in order to effectively move slower as a commission, and make sure we're like taking a closer examination at everything we're trying to implement or reform. We want to make sure that we have a good time frame to do so. So outside of that, I would say we're looking forward as a youth subcommittee to hopefully engaging with them again. And I think one of the other key takeaways was like the comparison to how LA is dealing with a lot of similar issues in terms of people experiencing homelessness and mental health crises and issues, as well as the issues of housing and affordability. And so, although we're looking at this as a policing standard in racial equity and policing, there was a state bill which was dropped to declare racism a moral and public health crisis. And I think that would have effectively allowed us to start moving into other paradigms that have intersectional importance. But right now, I think we're kind of focused on the policing aspect, which is just as important. But when we're looking at like providing other resources, such as more mental health resources and access, those things obviously need to exist in a larger conversation. So I'm hoping we can get more ideas on how we can do that.
Yeah, thanks, Commissioner Powell. In regards to your comment on the timeline and recommendations and like expectations on those, and what Dante had said or validated, Dante, do you have any follow-up to that? Or maybe it wasn't to this group and some of us weren't there, but anything to reiterate?
No, not really. Just this work is much bigger than the next few months. And in that time frame, how do we ensure that we can at least get the kind of the biggest, most immediate items addressed that the community is wanting to see? The more that we get stuck in the weeds, the more this work isn't going to happen, at least within that time frame. And so I would suggest sometimes that the best effort is not that the subcommittees are, drafting, redlining policy specifically, but putting out the intent and allowing those who are supposed to create those to meet that intent with then the committee's review of what it is that they're putting together.
Very good. Yeah, and I think that aligns with what we talked about, and Shafin had mentioned the opportunity to dream about the future and consider what does it look like and how might we get there. And he used the word leadership, if you recall, and that this is the opportunity to put something forth that's powerful, that shows your perspective. So I thought there was good dialogue, and I wanted to share with you guys what I pulled out from the notes. I'm sorry, Officer Groves and Commissioner McDonald wanted to see if you had anything first before I share that in response to that meeting with Shafin and Cimarron.
No, I think everyone's covered it for me.
So that was a question directed towards me if I had anything to share.
Yes.
I just wanted to make sure I understood you correctly.
I
don't.
McDonald first and corrected myself, so that probably threw you off.
You really did. I don't have anything to share regarding that at this time.
Okay, well, going back to Dante's point and Shaffin's point, we had some good discussions, and these recommendations should come forward as a collaboration with the commission and Salt Lake City PD and see there's value in that so that they're implementable. And I think there was good discussion, and here are some things that I pulled out, and you guys can tell me if this aligns with some of your takeaways. But I heard modify policies and procedures related to routing and responding to calls involving mental health issues and or incidents where somebody has a weapon and is threatening to use the weapon. So if we're thinking about the outcome, right, changing the outcome or envisioning the future, I heard this was a theme I heard a few times, perhaps looking at how calls are routed. And the second piece of that is to engage and incorporate social workers, crisis management workers, mental health professionals, professional counselors, or other effective resources to assist law enforcement and where appropriate, be the first responders. Yes, Commissioner McDonald.
One of the things I did want to bring up, and please correct me or educate me if I just missed something, but I read over our recommendations, and one of the things that I don't see, and I see it here as well, we speak to reallocating funds, and I know that we had got a copy of the budget and we looked at the budget, but we didn't actually recommend a dollar amount. Is that my understanding, or am I misremembering something?
No, I don't think you're misremembering something, and I don't know that it's on you as a commission to put a dollar amount. You identify where funds should be, and I think that's up to the city and powers to be to allocate funds to that and figure out where it's going to come from. Am I wrong on that, Dante, and the ask of the commission?
No, certainly as it relates to the recommendations that were submitted yesterday, it was a specific ask to prioritize the funding of, or prioritize the reallocation of funds for. So it's not up to you to figure out where the dollars come from or how they get balanced with, we're going to put it over here and take it from over here. That's weeds that will take you forever to figure out.
Okay, that's okay. Thank you for that. I just want to make sure I was on the right page with that. My question and my follow-up question to that is, how do we know? So say that they're going to allocate X amount of dollars, let's say $2. I'm just putting it out there to this project. One way to guarantee something's failure is to not give it enough resources and to just basically starve it to death. How do we, and what type of information will we have, or will we be given, or is it upon us to kind of research on our own based on other police departments and some of the things that they're doing regarding resources to know how much is enough and how much is too little to guarantee failure rather than success?
That's a great question. And I would suggest some of that could be, best practice of what other cities are doing. Some of that could be the chief or the training division, captain or specialty unit leader saying, there's no way we can do the intent of this with the dollars we've been given. And I would then suggest that's the commission's opportunity to use its voice back to council, to the mayor, to the press, that the intent of our recommendations have not been met.
Yeah, great question, Commissioner McDonald. And to the intent, like this, I think, from what I was hearing, captures the intent of how a better future might be realized through reallocation of funds to provide those additional resources, right? Like that's the intent. And then I'd say down the road, next steps would be to do as Dante just said and in response. But right now, I think your focus should be on the intent, right? And and make the recommendation and then have that dialogue.
And I would imagine the chief would be happy to come back and tell you, we appreciate what you're trying to do. We just can't get it done with what little funding we've just gotten.
Right.
Because he's counting on, I would suggest, our support and recommendations in our recommendations for reallocation, et cetera, to be able to do what he's being asked to do.
And that's where compromise comes in at, right?
Always on some level, yeah.
Okay.
Well, as an example, Commissioner McDonald, part of this, what I heard from all sides on the call too is reallocate money to provide additional mental health support. And the University of Utah, I think I captured this right, but the University of Utah Mental Health Institute has been a great resource, and would the community and the police department would benefit from an increased funding there. So I don't know if that needs to be reallocated or the ask would be to get it from somewhere else. But from what I heard, to help realize this better future and be more efficient and effective in policing for our communities, that relationship enhanced sounds like something that would be beneficial from what I heard.
Hey, Josh.
Yeah.
Josh and Commission. You
Yes.
care if I jump in for just a minute? Good to
Uh-huh.
see you all. Thank you. Such a beautiful day. I don't know, has the commission actually sat down and had a meeting with Jessica Waters at length to talk about the CCC, what they're doing, the shortfalls, the things that they need? I believe we've talked about it, but have we spent some time with her, Jessica, to ask those questions? Like we're talking a lot of things about mental health and support and filling the gap and all these things. I would strongly recommend that we schedule her, maybe this meeting, for an hour to sit down and have all those conversations, to know exactly what we're doing, what we're trying to do. I know Dante passed along some information about a STAR program coming out of Denver. Jessica knows that program very, very well because Lana Dalton, who runs that in Denver, used to be the CCC director here in Salt Lake City. So we know exactly what that team does and what it augments. And I think we focus so much on the mental health and response to these different calls. I would highly recommend if we could put aside an hour to get Jessica and perhaps her team to talk through some of these things. Just my suggestion.
If I can jump in, I appreciate what you just said, because as I speak to this more, I'm finding that mental health is always part of the conversation. And we recognize that our criminal justice system, and especially our jails, have become substitutes for mental institutions, basically. So I personally would love to be able to sit down with Miss Jessica. I didn't catch her last name, and speak to that, because we have essentially criminalized mental health care, mental health, and we're calling police on cases that involve mental health issues. So, and a lot of the things that we are talking to speaks to mental health. So they kind of go hand in hand. So I personally would really appreciate that being a part of this discussion.
So Chief, if I may, would your intent be in that to provide opportunity to build upon this discussion to help the subcommittee commission understand what's being done related to this, where some of the kinks are, what's being done, so that might help refine what a recommendation might look like?
Yeah, Josh, I just think it would be really helpful to have, an extended conversation where we can have her present what we do. So you know exactly kind of the baseline of what we're trying to do, the policies that direct our efforts. Ask her where the gaps are. Ask her what she needs to do this work. She'll give you her unvarnished opinion. She knows. And then we can talk about where we need to maybe, where we're going. What's the finish line? What's it look like? And then I think it would be really helpful for everybody to get an understanding, because this mental health issue touches so many things in police right now. And I think it would be a good discussion for everybody.
Okay, should I see a thumbs up on that? All right, great. And Dante mentioned in the
Well,
chat.
Dante has just mentioned that we did meet with her. The subcommittee did.
The training subcommittee met with her. I met with them both personally, and then they came to the subcommittee and described and explained the process, their funding or lack thereof, and just some ways, some things that would be much more helpful for them to better serve the community in the conversation around mental health.
Okay.
All right, good. Thank you, Chief, and we'll coordinate through the powers that be to arrange that. Sorry, I stopped sharing because I wanted you guys to be able to see each other during the discussion, and now I need to move on and get my screen back up. So you should be able to see it. Tell me if you can see my screen. Oh, now I can't see you. All right, can you see this? Yeah, okay. And again, what I pulled from the discussion that could be intents and the foundation for recommendations that we can flesh out. This one, provide and require training on the history of policing. The intent is to build that understanding of why some don't trust the police, and that might go to Dante's subcommittee, but I heard that as a theme from the group. And additionally, and I think Commissioner Powell touched on this, but partner with communities, have the communities tell you how they want to be policed, not how police want to police. Intent so communities feel empowered and PD can be most effective. I think that might be an intent that we build upon, like Commissioner Johnson mentioned, with our thought partners, right? Commissioner Johnson, you wanted to continue that discussion about how they're doing certain things, right? So this might be the basic recommendation that we build out with our thought partners before taking it back to the full commission. Anyway, these are key themes I pulled out that I thought they might be the basis of some recommendations that I heard from this subcommittee on that call with our thought partners. Did I capture them accurately? Are they foundations? Do you feel they're important, Commissioner Shiflett?
Yeah, I do. Sorry about that. I wanted to thank, who was it? Nate Groves, who sat in for the chief. He, just having him say that he understands this history of policing and that he believes that a lot of law enforcement does not understand because of their age group. They don't have a true history of policing. So I really wanted to, that also is like, okay, so people in law enforcement do really know the in-depthness of the history and understand that some of these younger law officers need to be trained. And also to your last point, the partner, that's also probably in that list that I just emailed out that you can look at later. But I definitely thank you, Chief Brown, for sending Nate Groves.
He is on the call with us right now.
Are you?
Yeah.
I
You
see
just
the
thanked him.
Thank you, Nate
All
Groves.
right, Carol, thank you.
All right, so that we can get to the other agenda items, but we'll have these on our agenda for our next meeting with our thought partners and can build on them with our other recommendations. And so before we move on to other agenda items, we tried to find some dates that work for Coffin and Suk Cimarron, and we landed on March 23rd or 31st. We tried to land on the 24th. Or sorry, that's a full regular commission meeting. We tried to land on the 31st is a subcommittee meeting where we could do it with them, or they're willing, and I am, to meet on March 23rd at 5 o'clock. But that's an additional meeting for you all for that week, because we do have full commission on the 24th. Is that overload for you, or do you feel like that would be helpful, valuable to have that follow-up with them on the 23rd, or do you want to wait till the 31st?
Everybody else can meet, but I'm not available on that day.
On the 23rd?
No, not that.
All right. Commissioner McDonald, Johnson.
I'm
My
available.
calendar.
I'm available.
Commissioner McDonald?
I'm checking my calendar.
Okay. Commissioner Powell?
I should be able to make myself available with the consensus of the group.
Thank you. Commissioner Bonuri?
What time are we thinking?
5 o'clock.
5 o'clock?
Or yeah, 5 o'clock. I've tried to keep it at the same hour. We could do 4 o'clock.
I should be good.
Okay.
And you know I need to have a calendar invite, right?
Yes, I do. Yep.
Okay.
All right. I'll send that out, and we can build on, our Officer Groves and Givens and Scott, are you available at that time on the 23rd?
Josh, I should be. That's a Tuesday. I should be.
The 31st would be better for me, but I'll try to make it work.
Okay.
I think, I don't know if we're trying to work around maybe kids' schedules, that is the week of spring break.
Yeah, my wife would have been mad, Chief, but you would have been more upset if I scheduled it and missed it, so I can make it work, but that's good consideration. Sounds like we can do it, and whoever can make it will build upon the momentum that we have on that with that discussion and revisit some of those potential foundations for some recommendations. We have 25 minutes left, and so I want to hone in on what's most important to you all. We talked about this. Let me circle back to the discussion we ended on last time, where Assistant Chief Brown had to leave. Were there follow-ups for Chief Brown or Doubt related to the relationships the police department has with other agencies, or anything to build on that, or thoughts on building capacity or information the subcommittee would want?
Can you repeat that again? I didn't quite comprehend.
Yeah, it was long-winded, so I'm happy to. So out of a previous meeting, the subcommittee identified that they'd like to explore and understand policies governing SLCPD's relationship with other agencies, such as ICE, FBI, CIA, and how those impact the community. We spent a few minutes at the end of our last subcommittee meeting on that, but don't know if we gave it adequate time, and wanted to see if Chief Doubt had anything to add, or Chief Brown, or the subcommittee members had additional questions or requests.
Josh, if just to jump in here a little bit, I missed the discussion, but I just want to reiterate to the group and to the commission, we do work with our federal partners, except I don't ever remember working with the CIA, Tim. But But I want you to know we focus on crime issues, not status issues, not immigration issues. I know under the Biden administration, there's been a new directive given for immigration enforcement and how they want to move forward with that, which should bring much more trust into some of our immigrant communities. But we don't enforce immigration. We focus on crime. That's our lane in the road, and that's what we want our communities to understand. The only thing we deal with is crime.
Okay, subcommittee, anything related to that or follow-up questions that might inform any kind of recommendation related to this or additional discussion?
If I could just ask a question, Chief. With the Biden administration's new policy, has that dictated a change in how SLCPD has functioned as it relates to undocumented folks?
No, sir, Dante, it does not. No, it doesn't change our approach or our policies. It basically gives the federal agencies a direction on how they're supposed to operate and how they're supposed to communicate with the local law enforcement.
So there's no hold placed on somebody who's been arrested for a misdemeanor assault?
We Dante, if we encounter somebody that's committed a crime, we don't ask what their citizenship is. We don't record that on any of our reports. We'll deal with it appropriately. We'll either write a citation or take them to jail. What happens at jail, that's up to Sheriff Rivera and any federal agency that works through the jail, but we don't report that independent.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Dante. Any other comments or questions related to that?
I have a question.
Yeah.
Does that mean that, and I'm not sure, well, I guess not. I was gonna say, does that mean we need to have a conversation with Sheriff Rivera and federal agencies, but we're working with Salt Lake City PD, so I'm assuming not.
Yeah, probably. Again, going back to leadership and what opportunities you have, probably would agree with that. All right. Last call, also quite related to this, but well, I want to ask Commissioner Powell. Keith Doubt provided an updated organizational chart. Want to make sure you got that, and if there were any questions for him or Chief while they're on with us.
No, thank you for providing that document, Chief Doubt.
You're welcome.
All right, thank you. We should have the full breakdown of the listening session. Dante, Larry's almost done with that. It's my understanding. The themes and responses, insights should be done in the next couple of days.
I believe that's true, yeah.
And will be shared with the group, and so we'll let you look at that, digest that, and we can have discussions on that. Next, I wanted to, while we have Mr. Cottrell on the line still, I don't see him. All right. I wanted to circle back to the ordinance and see if there are comments there, how you would like to proceed as a subcommittee related to that. You have recommendations or questions specifically related to the body-worn camera ordinance. I know from the meeting, as I mentioned, an intent was to ensure that the ordinance doesn't just increase accountability, but transparency. And the desired outcome is to prevent an officer from putting his or her knee on somebody's neck or using undue excessive force. That's what I heard from our call last meeting, and so maybe I'd put it to Chief Brown. That ordinance, maybe you can speak to the intent of that and what has changed in that, or if it does increase accountability, transparency, what the hopes are with the ordinance.
Yeah, Commission, thank you. The ordinance, well, first off, let me say, even before the ordinance, Salt Lake City PD has been very transparent and open. We have been putting out critical body-worn camera recordings of OICIs and different things that have happened for several years now by an executive order. The council passed an ordinance that talks more about the reporting and the tracking and auditing of some of these different things. You're in luck because we have Sergeant Mason Givens on the call. He's assigned to this group. Mason, maybe you could turn on your camera for a minute and you could explain what you do, what your role is in the audit squad, what we're doing. And this is a big topic. And I'd like you to Mason, take it away for a minute, and we may want to have further discussion on this because Salt Lake City's been very proactive. Sergeant Givens has rewrote many policies so that we're being accountable. And so, Mason, take it away.
Sorry, I'm moving you guys here so that the screen that you're on is the screen I'm looking at. So I am the audit supervisor, the audit and inspection unit supervisor. And I think I mentioned last time, we do multiple audits, reviews, inspections throughout the year, and one of which is a body-worn camera audit. This program, from an auditing perspective, started in 2020, and we just have wrapped up the 2020 audit, and we've continued on to 2021. 2020 was less intrusive, less aggressive, let's say, as far as an auditing and inspecting by comparison with 2021. And I'll give you an example. We originally started with my unit providing reviews for officers at random, and it would require a 2 video per officer review. So I have 2 auditors. They would both select 2 officers and then review 2 videos from those 2 officers per week. That takes a lot of staffing hours. We would not be able to do much more than that based on the audit unit's capabilities. About mid-year, we had to make an adjustment based right about the time that the mayor's executive order came out. And we took the responsibility of the review away from the audit and inspection unit, and we gave it to the supervisor who's over the actual employee. Because that actual supervisor has the ability to go further in depth with the review than the audit squad did. In order to maintain objectivity, the audit squad had a set amount of rules that we were looking for specific things. But the supervisor who's over that unit might have additional information as far as was the officer canceled before they arrived on the call. And that could explain why there isn't a recording where an auditor may assume there should be a recording. So it is a better practice to have the supervisor over the officer do the actual inspection or review. We continued 2020 out with that same 4 officers per week, 2 videos per officer. We did, I don't know the exact number, but let's say probably 60% of the department going that route, maybe 50, 60%, somewhere in there. Not everybody had cameras at that point. We hadn't quite got the funding boost to get the new cameras for everybody. So you have to keep that in mind. Once we knew that we were getting the funding and we were able to issue cameras out to everybody, we changed the program for 2021. And now everybody who has issued a camera will be reviewed in 2021 with the same 2 video standard. So, and when I say everybody, I mean, Chief Brown, you had yours, what, 2 weeks ago? So everybody gets it. So The data that's coming in, we're tracking that. That all can be available with the end of year reporting as far as, when the officers turn it on. Or interruptions. Did interruptions exist? Was it properly documented in a police report, which is required by ordinance, by policy, and by statute? And I think if you look at the directives, so state statute, and then you look at the ordinance, and then you look at the policy, you're going to see they're all very similar, and that's intentional because it is a best practice for us to go forward and to do this and to match this. And in certain areas, we've actually exceeded the directives from the ordinance and from the statute as well. The one area that I don't have a lot of knowledge in, and I'm wondering how it's working out, is the external audit. And I would be interested just because I'm, again, the audit supervisor. So I'd love to see how that aspect of it is going as well. So I hope I gave you a quick brief rundown as far as that's concerned.
Well, can you expound on that, or what expound on external audit? You'd like to see it, or what does that look like, or is it in place? What?
Well, it's in the ordinance. By ordinance, there's an external audit that's supposed to occur monthly. I believe it's a mayor's designee, and it's supposed to be 5 videos at random. And just from an auditing, like philosophical standpoint, how's it set up? How do they randomize? All those things. That's what I'm more interested in than what the results was or what they depicted on the camera. Just the setup of the audit, and then also who's doing that.
Sergeant Gibbons, how many did you say per week?
So in 2021, it breaks down to roughly 11 employees. I'm not even going to say officers because it's issued cameras for employees per week. In 2020, when we started this with the initial rollout, based on staffing with my unit, again, it was 4 officers per week, and that's all we could handle. And still do all the other reporting and use of force analysis, vehicle pursuit analysis, bias policing analysis, all of these other things that my unit does.
Thank you.
Officer Givens, just a couple of questions. So
Yes,
you said that responsibility was taken away from auditing and placed with the supervisor of that division. Is that correct?
So the responsibility did transfer, yes. And when I say take away and all that, it sounds a lot more severe than it was. What it does, the benefit of a person in the chain of command doing it is they can look at it and they can see everything. If you give it to an auditor, in order to stay objective, we're looking for specific metrics, and there may be some explanation. And I try to give you the example of an officer's dispatch to a call. So there is a record of a dispatcher sending into a call, and they may have been cleared before they ever showed up. So they never contacted anybody. They literally drove maybe 5 minutes towards this call, and then they were rerouted and sent to another call. We might hold that number and expect a body-worn camera to be there where one would not be there. And then it would look like the officer was at fault for not having a video, when in fact there is a perfectly reasonable explanation there. We cannot be recording all of these things, because if you did, your battery to your camera would die probably about 6 hours into your shift.
So the auditor wouldn't have access to all of that same information?
So an auditor could, but it's better for the supervisor to do that, because the supervisor has that interaction, okay? In order for us to maintain that objectivity and say, we're not trying to target an officer, we're not trying to do this, we're not trying to find fault. We are literally looking, is this a yes or is this a no? And then we report yes or no. Is this next category a yes or a no? Where a supervisor has more ability to say, this is a no, but I need to know why this is a no. Because I'm also the supervisor, I'm responsible for their performance. If they're slipping, I need to train them to a higher level. And when they ask that additional question, there may be an explanation, or it may identify a training.
That makes sense. But what I'm looking at, if he's responsible for their behavior, I mean, wouldn't that leave that kind of suspect to what he may let go in his audit?
Well, I'm sorry.
I agree with Commissioner Johnson. That's a good question.
Well, all of these audits have individual report forms that come back and are tracked and are part of an annual. So could a sergeant do that or a supervisor do that? They could, but they would be a fool to. If it looks like this is outside of the realm, it doesn't, you can tell if something's outside. If they're supposed to have a recording, yes or no. If they weren't on scene, they're not going to have a recording. If they were on scene, they should have a recording. And if they don't, then it better be narrated in the report. And there's explanation portion in there for them to do it. And maybe I'm not describing this very well. If Sergeant Groves has any input that he wants to, because he's actually the end user. He's one who has reviewed officers in this field.
No. Your explanation was great.
Okay.
I know there's a lot of gray areas in technology. And to move forward and to advance, my second question, and I love the fact that you pointed out that Chief Brown's cam was audited and everything, and everybody gets it at random. I want to go back to, I think it was an issue of funding, why cameras couldn't be activated from beginning of shift to end. And I think you explained part of it with a dying battery.
Yeah, so originally the funding, when I mentioned it earlier, was we didn't have the cameras themselves. We had the old Axon Body 2s, we had a bunch of battery packs. They were old, they were obsolete. The battery packs, just like any other battery pack, go bad, and you had very short life. The new cameras they're brand new, so they've got excellent batteries. I think they're probably like lithium batteries. But they're also excellent cameras. They are, if you've never seen them, they are like 4K extreme, high def, wide angle, they're exceptional. But with that wanting high quality video, you also are sacrificing power, because it takes power to run something that high output. And if you were to turn it on at the beginning of your 10-hour shift, I don't know exactly when it's going to kick off. My guess would be around hour 6 or 8 if you just ran it constantly through. And that's why I said you couldn't just turn on and start your car, start your call, go on this whole thing, because officers frequently will get sent one way, get canceled by another officer, get sent the other way. You would have hours and upon hours of officers driving around town, where, you could always argue something might happen, but rarely it does, maybe a traffic accident. Whereas if they're on a call and they're in the area, they turn it on and we capture it from the start.
So again, go ahead.
Johnson, if you want to follow up, I just want to say Dante's got to jump off and get to the training subcommittee, and didn't want you to think he's bailing on us and had enough. But then anything else, Dante, and then I'll jump back to Commissioner Johnson.
Thank you. I mean, I do have a question in mind, and it might be a longer answer that I can wait for. And I'll admit to not knowing all the details, and there may be an ongoing investigation, so I'll preface it from that. But as it relates to the K-9 unit and the issues around K-9, what clearly or seemed to be something that had been going on for some length of time, and some of the K-9 officers clearly had a camera, how could that escape review for such a length of time?
I can only speak to an audit perspective, right? Audits are picked at random with 2 videos. So let's say I am a K-9 officer and I went on 30 calls within a 1-week period. We will rank those 30 calls, 1 through 30, using a randomizing tool. If it picks call 26 and call 3, call 26 and call 3 might be perfectly legitimate calls where everything was done by the book when the supervisor does the review. It is a luck of the draw. It's a random thing. I can't go much further than that. I'm not involved in that case, and I don't think it's appropriate for me to do that. So this is more of a hypothetical answer to you, that there's always a randomization, and if there's a higher number of videos, you have a less chance of finding that 1 in a million video.
Understand. So,
and Dante, just real quick,
yeah,
you need to remember Mason's crews, they're looking for compliance to turning those cameras on and off. Specific things. Every use of force should be reviewed by the sergeant, by the lieutenant, by the new policies we brought in. So could that happen again? Probably not, because all those use of forces would be looked at much differently now.
Chief Brown, you're saying should be, but you really mean shall? Is that?
Shall, yeah, I'm sorry. I should use, yeah.
Because it's codified, right?
Yeah. And before Dante, yeah.
Already there, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
And just,
but that also assumes that I'm writing it up, because it wasn't written up as a use of force, though, as I understand it. Maybe I'm wrong. But anyway, I don't mean to open it up and then run, but I do have to go to the next subcommittee meeting. So I
You
appreciate
did, Dante. You did.
I appreciate that. So have a great rest of your meeting, and don't keep it too long because I need some.
Thanks, Dante.
Yep.
Commissioner
Thank
Johnson,
you.
sorry, Commissioner Powell, I promised I'd get back to Commissioner Johnson, then you're on deck.
No, I think I need to refer back to the technology question. But Officer Gibbons, you said it was a 10-hour shift that each officer has. Is that correct?
So yes and no. Most Salt Lake City police officers have 10-hour shift. The only ones that do not are airport officers. They work, I believe, 12. Is that right, Chief?
And with the new equipment that we just purchased, we still can't solve the power problem with the camera situation.
You absolutely can. What I'm saying is you can't start it at the beginning of your shift and expect it to last 10 hours. And that, so that maybe you don't understand, but we are not like on the clock running from gun for 10 straight hours. There is time when we're driving to calls, when we're in lineup briefings, when we're in line down briefings, when we're reading our policy, when we're doing these other things, these administrative tasks within that 10-hour shift. And if you deduct that, then there is adequate time in those new batteries to run a 10-hour shift and capture the calls for service, which is the intent of the body-worn camera, is the interaction with the public, with the actions of the officers on scene. There's plenty of battery life for that.
That's just, yeah.
If I could jump in.
That's perfect. That's just what I wanted to hear, that there's plenty of time that we could at least get 8 hours of drive time, operation time, interaction time with the public where nothing was deleted.
Right.
Yeah, and I just want to make sure we're clear on it, that the technology does not exist to have a camera run the whole shift for the entire time. It does not exist at this point in time.
Okay, I wanted to ask a question that came up last time. It relates to this. Under the ordinance, it requires some exceptions, but everyone wear them, right? And it says under Utah law, an officer must activate a body-worn camera prior to any law enforcement encounter or as soon as reasonably possible. And the subcommittee talked about the definition of law enforcement encounter, and that it's not in the definition section and might be helpful to be there. And I think, Mason, you had mentioned where that is defined, but it's not actually in the ordinance, but it is defined. Can you expound on that or tell us where that is and the definition of any law enforcement encounter?
Sure. A law enforcement encounter is defined in 77-7A 103 in the Utah statute. It is also defined throughout policy 422. We didn't think to reinvent the wheel. We used what was in the state statute. If it's a law enforcement encounter, we require officers to turn it on with a law enforcement encounter. And if you need me to read it, I can pull it up and let you know. But basically, if you're on a call for service, if you're taking law enforcement action, if you're collecting evidence, if you're, there are many. I think Sergeant Grove said there was something like 13 or 14 examples that are in there.
Yeah, no, that was helpful. And I think the takeaway from the subcommittee was, yeah, it's hard as a layperson read the ordinance and do the cross-referencing because they're not cross-referenced, right? So,
and I would add to Mason, the policy 422.3.3 is where it actually more specifically gets into when Salt Lake City officers are required to activate their camera. It references those state codes Mason talked about, but it also brings 7 distinct situations where an officer must activate their camera. Number 1 is all enforcement and investigative contacts, including stops and field interview situations. So basically, almost any public contact an officer has while they're on duty, they're required to turn their camera on. It also includes traffic stops, any type of traffic stop, even a stranded motorist assist, anything where we interact with the public in a traffic sphere. Self-initiated activity in which a member would normally notify dispatchers that they're out with somebody. Say, they see somebody walking down the street, hey, I'm going to step out and talk to this person. An officer is supposed to activate their camera during those times. Any other contacts become adversarial, and the initial contact in a situation that would not otherwise require a recording. So if an officer, even say they're waving at somebody as they drive by, and there's some type of confrontation, obviously the officer is expected to turn their camera on. Any use of force is an obvious one, that's in there. Any dispatch call for service is listed in there. And then any execution of any warrants, search warrant, arrest warrants, anything where obviously we're coming in contact with people there too. Now I will say state law prohibits officers to, or most people to activate cameras inside of hospitals, for example, where there's an expectation of privacy. However, officers are not held to that standard if they're conducting a formal police investigation where evidence has to be collected. So that's just a brief summary for you, but yeah, the actual policy goes into more detail than that. But.
Yeah, that's helpful. So if I understand you correctly, the ordinance, state statute, policy, you feel that you exceed best practices in terms of accountability and transparency.
I would say so, most definitely. I think we go above and beyond what's required. And I think we've been doing that for many years. I think Salt Lake's quite an example, actually, to many law enforcement agencies on how well we do transparency work in our policies and things like that.
And Josh, just real quick, I just want to go back to kind of hit on something that Sergeant Givens was talking about. In 2020, we were doing 4 videos a week times 52 weeks was about 208 videos, right? In a year's time. With the new policy, you're doing 2 videos of every officer. So if we have 500 officers, we're looking at well over 1,000 videos that will be audited per year. So that is almost 5 times as many as we did in 2020. And then the other component of that is that there's an outside independent review of 5 videos per week. So 5 times or 5 per month that's 60. So we internally went from 200 to 1,100, and with the outside review, they'll look at another 60. So, and Mason's always he's also over the CLIA certification, and that is best practices to maintain that accreditation. So,
thank you.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you both. MJ, Commissioner Powell, you had a hand raised.
Thank you. My question was to Sergeant Groves or Gibbons. Is there an ordinance to ensure that when like seizing property, as in like the Camp Hope cleanup, even if there's no citizens within the like physical distance of officers, is there a requirement for them to be recorded while they're cleaning people's property up and stuff, or is that not an ordinance? Like maybe searching is one thing, but seizing, such as seizing someone's property or temporarily stopping someone in a vehicle, would like everyone in the vehicle be subject to like being recorded under that premise, or would they have the right to leave that incident if they didn't want to be recorded? Or like what are the ordinances and incidents that involve one or more persons, and how like is there anything specific surrounding that, or would it be treated as an individual incident?
MJ, that's a good question. I would say that any call for service or any police action at all, no officer would ever be doing those cleanups, whether or not there was any actual people experiencing homelessness around, without turning their camera on, because that would be a violation of our policies, just acting in a police capacity and not having their camera activated. So yes, the public contact thing is more of a given with our officers, but yes, any call where, especially when dispatch would always be aware of where they are doing those cleanups, and they would be required to have their camera on, whether or not they're contacting actual people.
Perfect, thank you. That kind of is interrelated to the second point I was asking, so thank you.
If I could pose a question MJ asked last time, and maybe you answered it directly, but the question was raised about data sharing. If the data is shared with any other corporation or entity.
You asked specifically about Banjo, which is a program I've never heard of till that conversation. We use Taser products, and Chief Doubt probably can speak better to this, but I do not believe they share any data. I think that's all maintained within us.
We don't share any data.
Hey, and just so you know, when Banjo, when they were looking into getting, when they were trying to develop that program, Salt Lake City was very hesitant. We didn't participate with Banjo, so we didn't do it.
Thank you for clarifying that. That was a big concern of a lot of University of Utah students because it's been proven they were interlinked to white supremacist organizations. So that was a concern of ours, but thank you for clarifying.
Yes, thank you. Great information. So with being 7 minutes over, Commissioner Shiflett is giving me the evil eye because we're over. I recognize that.
I do have a question though. We
Okay,
wanted to ask Mark Cottrell something and he wasn't on the call. Does anybody remember what that was?
And Mark has texted me, he's having internet problems, and you might have seen him pop on and off because he's trying to get a connection. We'll see if he has a
ask.
Yeah, this is Mark. I'm here. I'm just running to grab my kids, but I could certainly listen and try to answer any questions if there are any.
The original question was, why was the law enforcement encounter definition not in the city ordinance? I think we've talked about it quite a bit. And I believe that the city's intention was to use the state code definition for law enforcement encounter. Is that correct?
You would probably have to speak to council members to verify that that was their legislative intent. I certainly don't want to assume what they intended with respect to that decision. But I would say from a drafting perspective, generally speaking, you don't want to create any definitions that would run into conflicts with state law. Certainly, I don't see any conflicts. Certainly more could be done if they desire to do so. You just want to avoid conflicts. But sorry to punt on that. I just don't know what their legislative intent was. You'd have to speak to council members about that.
Yeah, and I think Mason answered that adequately. And we know where the definition is. It was just a layperson finding it might have a challenge or might question that, especially since there's a definition section, right? And that's not included and seems critical.
Hey, Josh.
Yes.
Just real quick before we get away from cameras, I just want to give the commission a quick update because this is important. I think you should know this. All the new camera systems that we have a chip that is put inside the taser and inside the holster of the service weapon. If you activate your taser, it turns on everybody's camera within, I don't know, 50 feet, quite a distance. If you pull out your service weapon, it turns on everybody's camera. If you activate your lights in your car, it turns on your camera and anybody around, and that prevents, in the heat of the moment, forgetting to turn that on. And also, even if you turn your camera on, they will actually go back in time 30 seconds. So they're running all the time on a buffer. So we've had officers get into a situation where it's after the situation has occurred, they've hit their button and it's all been recorded. So, I mean, we've had officers go through an intersection, get hit by another car, turn on their camera, and we're able to go back in time and capture 30 seconds worth of information. So the technology is quite impressive.
Yeah, thanks for sharing, Chief, because I did have a question about real-time accountability, and that speaks to that and capturing data. Thank you. Any questions or comments in follow-up to that from the?
Yeah. Thank you, Chief, because that cured the question that I had. And thank you, Officer Givens, because you certainly gave me more information than I needed, but it was helpful. Thank you.
And I have a question too. Thank you both, because that was really good information. Chief, is that just Salt Lake City, or is that a new standard across the country for the cameras?
No, that's if your cameras are funded to that level, And that was something that the council did last year is they funded, I mean, we used to get about $512,000 a year for our camera system. They doubled it to 1.2 million. And that's why everybody got new cameras, including me. And we got the latest and greatest, the high definition with a lot of the bells, lights, and whistles that we have right now. So
That's great. That's really good to know. I hope it benefits it.
Yes, thank you. So here's where I'm thinking we go. I'll send out a calendar invite for March 23rd to continue our discussion with thought partners and the beginnings of some recommendations that we can vet out with them. And as Commissioner Johnson said, understand best practices and what's working there and how it might integrate here. Also, as they suggested, we talked about, we would probably build out positives too, like as we've discussed about just now, body worn cameras, right? The positives around that, support for that. So I will send out the invite for that on the 23rd. We'll have regular commission meeting next week. And also we'll send out Commissioner Shiflett, if she hasn't already, I can't remember, there are so many emails. She found the raw survey questions, right? And so I don't know if everybody has received those, but she has those, and if have not been shared, I will share those so that we can have a discussion about that on our next call as well.
You did share them, by the way. I just, it was what, two meetings ago? I don't know. Like you said, we have so many meetings.
Yeah, I know the link and the survey responses, the summaries. I wasn't quite sure if everyone has the actual questions, but sounds like you do. Thanks, Commissioner Shiflett.
And I'd love for everybody to review that, what I just sent, that video especially. Again, it's a retired law enforcement officer in Baltimore. I'm from Maryland, and we weren't permitted to go to Baltimore. So just read that, okay?
Thank you for the homework. We'll include it in the minutes and with the information sent out. So thank you, commissioners. Thank you, Chief. And
MJ's had his hand up for a little bit.
Oh, sorry.
Thanks, Chief. Real quick, it's been brought to my attention in the school safety subcommittee right now that they're discussing the Mayor's Peace Pact. And it's not our Mayor's Peace Pact, but I'll post it here in the chat for you guys all to click on. But if you can review this before next meeting, it's really important to the youth subcommittee. We think it could be very applicable to the work the Policies and Practices subcommittee could do. To give you guys a little insight real quick, the Peace Pact could, I'm going to share my screen with you. Actually, I will do that next meeting, but it would basically create provisions that would evaluate all policing related contracts, policies, and cultural norms. It would advocate for federal action. So it would, local leaders, it puts an emphasis behind local leaders working with federal representatives to enact laws to provide a national standard for policing. AAMA supports the following federal action and encourages immediate adoption. The George Floyd Justice and Policing Act of 2020 passed by the House, which seeks to, among other provisions, end racial and religious profiling, ban chokeholds and no-knock warrants, limit military equipment on American streets and require body cameras, hold police officers accountable in court, provide resources to investigate police misconduct, provide training and accreditation standards for law enforcement officers, collect data on police misconduct and use of force, which I believe they started doing. But also create a robust community engagement program. And the belief behind that is that community members should have an ongoing, robust engagement with their local police department. And that should include positive recreational opportunities, as well as community input regarding operations. So as we know, in the next meeting, we'll be able to suggest the point I raised about how some communities have different definitions of policing, and what policing in that individual community should look like. And we should allow more community members to give input into what they want their police officers and law enforcement officers to do in their communities. So creating a citizens advisory board, that's something that has already been done. And Tanya Hawkins, I'm not sure if she's here today, but maybe she could give us a little more insight into the work her board does with the, or maybe she's on the Chief Citizen Advisory Board, but I know there is a Citizens Advisory Board. Soliciting input from community-based and advocacy organizations on police community relations, increasing positive youth police interactions through athletic leagues and other youth programs. And I would like to put an emphasis here. Other youth programs could be programs like the Explorers program, which don't have secured sets of funding for annual rollover years. So I think they're part of like a community initiative within the department, but it'd be cool to see that program expand more, and to maybe see more law enforcement classes at high schools, to maybe help with that history piece and also that community civic engagement piece. To speak on that, I took a law enforcement class in high school with Sergeant and Quartermaster Cody Logie, who really introduced me to the history of policing. And then also we were allowed to like actively engage in positive conversation that allowed us to see each other's views on a normal basis, but not once did I ever worry about like getting an unfair grade. So I think that that's a thing to look at more. I'm reviewing police engagement with local schools and colleges and universities, and we'd like to make an emphasis between the colleges and universities aspect. As a student at the University of Utah, I've, violence is not unheard of, and a lot of people do experience it. And unfortunately, there's not a lot of faith in our school administration to partner well with that department currently. I met with Chief Chapman when he was there multiple times, and while I have my own views as to why he was removed, it's unfortunate that we can't have more engagement between the student body and the department there. So not to kind of go up and over their heads, but I would like to maybe start an active conversation between the UU PD and Salt Lake City Police Department on how they can better fill that security gap between like tracks and upper campus and lower campus by 7-Eleven. Creating a local pipeline for hiring and recruiting diverse law enforcement professionals. So as we know, FTOs were lacking, and we need more of that. But the budget portion, before I stop talking, is really the critical aspect. To the extent there's local authority over establishing policing budgets, such budgets should reflect locally informed priorities and values. Special attention should be paid to the following line items. Equipment, military grade equipment should be limited, thus decreasing the militarization of police departments. Mental health resources, increase mental health resources and different avenues or programs of what that can entail. Remember thinking new in that regard. Pension expenses, prevention and reentry resources, salary expenses, substance abuse resources, and homeless resources. Emphasis behind that would be looking into how we can petition the city council to maybe look at creating detox centers, or creating new safe zones for people experiencing homelessness to be free and to not have their property thrown away every other week. Training including de-escalation and unconscious bias. As we all know, we all have biases, and I think it's important that one of the recommendations we submitted to the city council as well as the mayor's office was to include more trainers of color that can really insert that unconscious perspective of how we might not be able to always understand each other, but we can always fairly look at each other's perspectives. So thank you for letting me share that with you guys real quick. I'm being told there's not currently a lot of support for this, but we would encourage everyone to take a fair chance to look at it and to negotiate its impacts. So thank you.
Now, thank you, MJ, that we briefly broached this at the beginning. I'm glad you brought it up again because we had it on the commission agenda last meeting. And so the hope is that we can recommend this as a commission. And sounds like the youth subcommittee has specific recommendations related to it. So please review it and be prepared for next Wednesday to speak to it or support it for adoption. Thanks, MJ. Commissioner Powell, appreciate that.
Thank you.
All right, we'll include the link to that again in the minutes and get those out, and appreciate your time and commitment to this and allowing me the opportunity to be involved and assist you. So have a good night. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Good night, everyone.